Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hit Me With Your Best Pint podcast. We're doing a little bit of an intro this week. This week I was in Louisville, Ohio at Unhitched Brewing Company speaking with Garret and Adam. And we had a bit of fun this week because we're in the middle of the March Madness brewery brackets and we are up against each other. And so it was fun all week kind of goading each other and, taking little jabs here and there, all in good fun to kind of promote the March Madness and promote each other's breweries. It was super fun. And so it was great to sit down with these guys and discuss a couple of beers at their brewery. I just want to let everyone know that I totally dominated the arm wrestling competition that Adam wanted. It's his own fault, but I took care of business. So hopefully Hopnesia comes out victorious in this contest. Outside of that, that's what we've got for this week. We're going to move along to the episode. All right, everybody, welcome to our next episode. This will be episode 3 of Hit Me With Your Best Pint. Today I'm in Louisville, Ohio at Unhitched Brewing Company with Garret Conley and Adam Longacre. Garrett's the brewer here, Adam's the owner. And today we're going to talk about a couple of beers. We have Ironwood Fang. It's a Saison that happens to be in the bracket against Hopnesia for the March Madness, and today's the last day for voting. And then we also have their 10-pin pills here. So when we start here, so we're right here in Louisville, kind of on Mill Street and Main Street right here. So
yep.
Pretty easy peasy to find if you get into Louisville. What year did you guys open here?
2019, October 2019.
Yeah, just right before the storm.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's so there was a couple of breweries that opened right around that time, and I'm glad we were established for just a little while before that, but it's that was a rough time to be opening a brewery, but you guys seem to have weathered the storm okay, and
somehow we weathered the storm. Tons of pivots. We've done like 3 or 4 grand openings, since then. But in some ways it helped us. But yeah, that was a shit time for sure.
yeah, for sure. So I'll start with Garret here. Kind of what got you into brewing beer?
So for me, it was, I think like a lot of folks, it was home brewing. Also coupled with consumerism. Alcoholism? I don't know it.
Consuming, yeah.
Yeah. So I got out of the Marine Corps. We're both vets, and it's then I wanted to figure out what that next thing was going to be. Went to junior college for a little while. Ended up in culinary school, and ended up working at a restaurant in Chicago called the Publican. For me, first American beer hall, I think, of the new era in America.
Yeah, I got a chance to go to the Publican the last time I was in Chicago, but that was 6 years ago.
And it's
fantastic.
It's become a staple in the city, and definitely for the beer forward restaurants. Yeah. So, and my goal, my dream was always like, hey, I'm gonna open a beer focused restaurant, kind of in that vein.
Yeah. And
was working there, home brewing, kind of had some opportunities through the relationships that they had to go and make, 4th anniversary beer of the Publican, go to Three Floyds or Lagunitas or something, and have those collaboration experiences were powerful for me. Like, I was taken with like the scale, the engineering, like all that shit.
Right, because it's crazy when you're like home brewing and stuff, and then you walk into like a big production brewery like Lagunitas or Revolution or one of those places out there, and you're just like, holy smokes.
Yeah. Can I cuss, by the way? I did already, but
yes, you can.
All right. I'm hardwired. I was like,
me too. Yeah.
Usually I'll make it through something and be like, I didn't say fuck. That was great.
Say it as many times as you want. This is not a podcast focused for children, so
well, hopefully not.
It's fine. I have a hard time editing myself. Also, it's.
But
the infantry in us, I
suppose.
That's
right. The both of us, and Mike too.
Yeah, Mike as well.
That was the one we did. That was 2 years ago or a year and a half
What's
ago.
Up Start podcast.
Yes, that was hilarious. Yeah. We looked at each other and we were like, "Yeah, I was in the." You were in the infantry? You're all the infantry. Like, there's some sort of a field study that can be done here.
A bunch of drunkards and
Hellraisers, man.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But sorry to pull us off base. I'm good at that. But so was cooking and then started making charcuterie, working in kind of the butchery end for Publican opened a butcher shop across the street. And so I was managing the salami, that fermentation. Yeah. So, and just wanted like hell to get into the brewing industry. But you're like 2010, 2011, it was the sexiest thing ever. And there was, a quarter, half as less breweries.
Yeah, just a handful.
And so I'd be like, hey man, I would know like the head brewer of a brewery because of these collaborations. I'd be like, hey, if you ever need anybody to come in and, wash kegs or do whatever, they'd be like, all right, man, you're third on the list. And they're like, shit,
Yeah, because back then too, it was, I think it's probably changing a little bit now, even though I know it's still there. But like back then, it was a lot of, like get your foot in the door with some free or very cheap labor,
100%.
like just being willing to do whatever to get into work at a brewery, and that's kind of slowed down, I think now, fortunately, which it should.
Yeah.
So crazy time back then. But yeah, I think now because there's like 5,000 breweries in the country plus at this point, it's a little tougher to find skilled labor for those positions. Adam, what got you into wanting to own a brewery, aside from the sexiness of it and obviously the benefit of having beer around all the time?
Similar, like I've been homebrewing since college, and it's kind of like one of those like pipe dreams for a young dude. It was a pipe dream for 20 some years. And so we've tried, like I lived out west for 15 years prior to moving back to Ohio. I was in Chicago for a minute with a buddy, Ian, who worked at Goose Island. So we had some ideas like in Chicago to do some stuff out in Arizona, but young, no money, it's just not going to happen. Yeah. So fast forward, wife, 3 kids. My wife grew up here in Louisville. We moved back 10 years ago, and, the dream was still there. We come back to a depressed, downtown area. Real estate is cheap. I'm like, hey, this might be the time. And it was kind of like one of those like shitting off the pot moments.
Right. And I think that's a story of a lot of smaller breweries, especially, around here, is, you've got in this area, because it's the Rust Belt, there's a lot of depressed downtown areas and places with some cheap real estate that, hey, if you're willing to rehab it a little bit, you can get a solid building and make it happen. And that's how you see that here with you guys, Sandy Springs and Minerva and stuff. And then it just kind of helps revitalize that downtown space. You get people wanting to come downtown and see what's going on because at least there's a brewery and a restaurant there. Something to do.
And that was it. It started from like, hey, let's own a bar, let's own a brewery, to, hey, let's build this business because it's going to have an impact for the community. We've got 3 kids in school here, so we're now embedded in the community. So it's kind of like, it's nice that I did it in my 40s and not in my 20s.
Right.
Totally different experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you guys said you're closed on Sunday for St. Patty's Day, but you guys have any big plans for the next couple of days? Obviously, probably not dyeing any beer green, but...
We're pretty traditional in everything that we do. Yeah. And so, we did a Reuben pizza, and we have Space Bucks back on,
It's a Schwarz beer, so not dry Irish stout, but in the veinish.
Yeah,
it was just kind of in there.
Something dark in the glass,
Yeah, and our porter's on, so it's like, yeah, it's not. It wasn't a huge focal point, but it was stars aligned, and I was like, dude, it's perfect.
All right, next question. Do you guys have plans for the upcoming eclipse? You doing any kind of event, party?
Well, so we're closed on Mondays as well. But we were going to do an event, and this is months ago. We planned for the bowling team was having their end of the year dinner banquet, and it was here on Monday. And so we had that scheduled up until a couple weeks ago, and then the school canceled it because like no event can happen on Monday.
Right.
And because we're closed, I'm actually traveling. Katie's traveling on that day. We just said we're just not going to do it. I wish we could because I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
The library's doing something down the street. So
Yeah.
What are you guys doing stuff?
Yeah, we have an Eclipse party planned. I'm not sure what all the events
I saw there's a
are,
bunch of
but-
stuff going on.
Yeah, I know they're planning on having some music and stuff out there, and once the totality is taking place because of all the weirdness that surrounds that,
Yeah,
they're kind of like
totally.
going to ask everybody to
Yeah.
quiet down and hear the silence of the animals and
That's
stuff,
right.
and like all that weird stuff that's supposed to happen with these. So
gonna be crazy.
it'll be interesting to watch and see.
I'm mad. I'll be on the West Coast. I'm gonna miss the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think I get like 10% totality, so
Yeah.
it's not gonna be anything.
Well, we'll all take some pictures
That's right,
through our
yeah.
specialized lenses
Yeah,
and
that's true.
let you see what we saw. What kind of brewery do you guys see yourselves as? A certain type of a brewery? I know there's some breweries specialize in only lagers or sour beers or only hazy, juicy stuff, or dessert tea, IPA or stouts and that kind of stuff.
I'll let Garrett kind of talk about the specifics, but I think in general we don't have necessarily a specific style. I wish we could brew all lagers. I wish we could have 16 lagers on tap.
Same.
All of us. Yeah.
But I think so. Garrett and I actually met in 2018, a year before we opened, and the conversation, when we talked about beer, was, "What's your favorite style? What do you gravitate towards?" And it was both of us were like very Saison forward folks. We both like the uniqueness of the styles, the ambiguity, the unknown factor of Saisons, and so that's always been a focal point for us. We do enjoy brewing lagers. We have a very long lagering period, so we don't have as many as we'd like, but I think we might have 4 on right now. So I'd say Saisons, lagers. I think in general we're very Midwest agricultural focused, so very rustic in nature. I think in the 4 years we've been open, we've only had maybe 2 or 3 beers with an actual adjunct in it. All those adjuncts are grown in Ohio or Michigan. Very natural. We let the agricultural products kind of tell the story. Garrett, you can talk about the under manipulation, if you will, and your philosophy behind it.
Yeah, I think we're not, the way I always sum it up, we always do, like when we bring new staff members in, I'll do like a little tour of the brewery, explain just nuts and bolts process, ingredients, things like that, especially for people that have never made alcohol or beer. And the point I always come to is that we make traditional style beers with local ingredients. That's kind of a good sum up for us.
Yeah, and I was going to touch on that here shortly. I know you guys are pretty focused on sourcing, everything within a 200-mile radius?
400
mile
unfortunately.
radius.
Yeah, I wish it was less.
Yeah, it's obviously because of the nature of agricultural products, especially for beer in this state, you got to kind of cast a little bit of a wider net. Because you get one bad extra rain in the springtime or something, and the barley crop is unusable sometimes.
Well, and for us, it's all yeast.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, it's there's no Ohio-based yeast lab for brewing quality. There's, Bloomington, Indiana. There's Toronto. So it's in that sphere. And for me, being from Chicago, I have a relationship with Lance and with the guys at Omega.
Yeah.
And it's just hard. Even for, the Saison we're going to drink, there's 3 different yeast strains in there.
Wow.
So I can call them and be like, hey, dude, can we do 20% this?
Wow, nice.
And they're cool about it. They're really cool about it. I think it's just I think I always joke about, but Donald Glover has a stand-up where he talks about nerds being just really interested in specific things.
Right.
And that's Omega's that. They're just yeast nerds. And I'm like, oh, dude.
Right.
I'm so excited to work with them. But yeah, that's kind of the bullet point. We're not specifically style-based, but I would say that we err on the side of traditional beer styles and then agriculture, like Adam hit on. That's kind of
And that's, I think, we focus more on the traditional styles too, and I think it's, kind of a function of 2 things where, that's kind of where our clientele is out where we're at because we're in a rural area.
Heck yeah.
And, the people that frequent us out there aren't necessarily looking for those, hazy IPAs or, big dessert beers and that kind of stuff. And it works well for me because I'm not terribly interested in brewing those things.
Hell yeah.
I very much, I got into craft beer, drinking those more like big West Coast style IPAs is what got me started in it. And as I get older, it's kind of like I'm just in love with lagers now at this point, where it's just I would drink only lager all the time if that's all that there was. I would not be sad.
Yeah.
But at the same, every once in a while you got to step out and try something new. Yeah, we're kind of in the same vein where it's like we're doing. We try to keep a selection of styles, and we also have to kind of keep in mind that every beer's got to be pretty drinkable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at as well. So let's talk about the beers that we have in glass today. I know we have the 10-pin Pilsner and the Ironwood Fang Saison. I'm not sure which one you want to start. I mean, I think we've drank the most of the Pilsner so far, so we should probably start there before it's gone.
Yeah, we can talk, and it's actually a perfect segue from what you were talking about. Like, we're in, Busch Light country, whatever you want to call it. People that want drinkable beers. That's a big thing. It's funny, I was just talking to somebody during lunch at the bar here today. A big point of if I'm going to rebrew it or if I'm going to put it on, even from a concept, can I drink 20 ounces of it? Can I drink like a pint of it? Not because, like a bravado or whatever else. It's like you want to have that, you want to come back to it. Right. You hear a lot of these like really high level like mastery brewers that talk about what is that? I don't know. There's a lot of different elements of a beer that you're going to come back to it. Is it dryness? Is it complexity and flavor? Is it, bitterness? I don't know. But whatever it is, 10-pin, both these beers have it, but 10-pin is like that, our light lager, our house lager, is going to be that approachable beer for those people that are like, I never had a craft beer, but I usually drink Busch, or I usually drink Miller Lite, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've had the experience, as a lot of places have had, where you start people on those lighter beers that you're making as like that bridge. And I talked to Andrew about this at Lockport too. They have their Gateway Cream Ale, and it's I said that's like the perfect description of what most breweries' lightest offerings are. Is it's like that bridge the gap beer between the domestic, mass-produced light lagers that many people either grew up drinking, or it's the most ubiquitous thing that is around still in America. And you kind of want to give them something slightly familiar, but with enough extra flavor that they're like, oh wow, this actually tastes good.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like something that you can sit and drink 20 of. Yeah. Hanging out with your buddies fishing or something, you can actually taste it and think about it for a second. It's not just a fleeting, thing on your palate where you're just like, oh, okay, well, I can get this down, but it's not particularly enjoyable or anything like that. I think these beers are great for doing that job. And like I said, the older I get, the more that's kind of the style I want to drink anyways, but I still want it to taste good.
Yeah.
And I want to know that it doesn't have a bunch of junk in it.
Yeah.
So.
It's fun. That's like one of the most fun parts of the job, I think, is having those people come in, say like, hey, this is what I typically drink. And you're like, great, awesome. These are the things we're going to have that are comparable. And for us, like to Adam's point, I think we have at least 7 lagers on right now. We have a ton on.
Yeah.
And to like walk them through and be like, these are all in that vein. Like, you can like them for different reasons, but...
And then the next thing you know, they're moving on to your pale ale and your IPA. And
you were talking about this.
They're, motherfucking you because, I got to spend $6-7 on a beer now because now I have to drink this. It's like, nobody's twisting your arm about it. But also, you're welcome.
Yeah, right? It's double-handed, backhanded compliment.
Exactly. So that's, this beer is lovely. Every time you guys have it on, I said when I come here, I usually order this beer. It's probably my favorite of your lineup just because it just like hits that mark of like refreshing and just easy to drink.
Yeah.
Goes right down. You can have a few of them and not be, stumbling about.
Yeah.
It's a very nice beer. And we'll, we kind of touched on already what you like about that style of stuff. The malts you guys are using, is this all house malts stuff or?
Yeah, so that's a big, one of the pros and cons of being set on that radius for sourcing ingredients, we had West Branch Malt House close, which was I just broke my heart.
Yeah.
They, from many angles, walked the walk, and it was a hard one for me. But we've transitioned over to so house malts, and then we use rustic as well down in Marysville.
Yeah.
And then for a lot of specialties, the only way I'm actually able to use roasted malt is Sugar Creek, which is outside of Indianapolis.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's and then the time we were opening, there was kind of a big emphasis from the brewing community that corn was evil and rice was evil and all this stuff. So there's 5% yellow dent corn in it, grown down in Marysville, and it was something that our history in America, like corn is awash in so much of it. It's like
cream ales, pre-prohibition lagers,
yeah.
all contain corn, rice adjuncts.
What's the Cruz Blanca beer that they had?
It was a grisette, but it was 100% Boone County white corn from Sugar Creek.
It may have been the best beer I've.
It's gnarly. It's super gnarly. Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's cool too because that specific variety of corn was invented in the same county that Caleb at Sugar Creek is in.
Yeah, wow.
So he's like kind of keeping it alive.
Cool, very
good.
good. Yeah, I'd love to see kind of farmers in different territories across the country, kind of keeping those heritage grains and stuff alive. Like Carolina Gold Rice and all that kind of stuff that kind of lost to time after a while, but you had a few people saving seeds and they've brought things back, which is always interesting.
That was the original Fang series.
Yes.
For the Saisons, we did Ironwood,
Oakwood, and Maplewood.
And those were based on 3 different heritage grains.
Wow.
Just a showcase, I think, for us, that agricultural push and why Saison was a good option for us. We love it, but it's a good vehicle for agriculture.
Yeah, and that's, Saison, I think, for me as well, is one of those things that it's a style of beer that I absolutely love because it's endlessly interesting when you're drinking. Not only is it refreshing and, all those things you're looking for that kind of end-of-the-day beer, but it is because of the fermentation character of it and how those beers are fermented. It is endlessly interesting to me because you sip it, and on the first sip you might get crisp apple or pear, and then the next sip you get a little more the peppercorn note or clove or even maybe sometimes mild banana and that kind of stuff. Just it never ceases to be intriguing to me having a Saison, and then there's such a wide breadth of Saison as a style where you've got some that are breaded and get funky and all that kind of stuff and sour, and I'm not a big sour guy, but I just love the whole science of Saison fermentation. I wish I had a better palate for sour beer because I'm so interested in the science of it all and just everything you can do in that space, but I've tried and tried and tried. My palate just is not made for sour beer for some reason. It's not for me. I wish it was.
I think that's the coolest thing though, is having that realization and then specialization. It's we were talking earlier about your pills. Your pills is outstanding.
Oh, thank you.
And it's but that's probably because you really like that style of beer. And it's all right, I'm going to tweak this, tweak that, get it to where, but it's on another level, man. It's so
Thank
good.
you. I appreciate that. That's I said I drink probably at this point more of that beer than anything else in my lineup. One, because we now package it, pounder cans.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy to grab a 6-pack and go home and just just sit
Open
on the
them
couch. It's fantastic for that. So we'll talk about the Ironwood Fang then that we have here. And I'm going to take a sip of it because I haven't had one yet, and it's been a hot minute since I've had this beer.
Yeah, so Ironwood, for us, like Adam was talking about, we kind of connected really early on about our love for Saison. I like Saison for a multitude of reasons, like we talked about. Great showcase for agriculture.
Yes.
Historically, the farmers that grew it, it was a refreshment mechanism for field workers. And you get that argument to go on and on between brewers for
when
sure.
the water was bad,
Right.
The beer had to be consumed.
But you had farmer grew rye and oats. Their Saison had rye and oats.
Yeah.
This one has wheat and barley. Endless amount of interpretation, manipulation. It's like you said too. It's almost unclassed. Like even you look at the BJCP, they're like it's a palish kind of beer,
right? And it can run the range from like pale to amber almost. And my probably favorite example of Saison, and I think it's a lot of people, Saison DuPont. I talked to John about that last week briefly, but it's that is such a wonderful beer, and it's so simple in ingredients and process, but the fermentation of it just turns it into such a complex beer.
Yeah.
But it's still just so refreshing, and that's we had a Saison for a few years there, and I'll get around to making it again here. But Saisons are, in my experience, anyways, a little bit of a tougher sell to a lot of people. And that's why I'm
100%.
glad that this is kind of one of the motivations for me doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Is to take styles like Saison and try to highlight them to the public and get people to try it.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things I'm like, if you give it a chance, I think more often than not, people are really going to like it. Because it is just so interesting to drink, but it still accomplishes most of what you want out of a beer.
Yeah.
And that's, I made that beer because I was in love with Saison DuPont, and so it was literally like me brewing Saison DuPont to the best of my ability at my brewery.
Yeah.
And it was, just only Pilsner malts and East Kent Golding hops.
Yeah.
And just boiled to death to try to drive some more character out of that Pilsner malts.
Yeah.
And then just hot fermented with some, Belle Saison, and try to drive as much yeast character into that beer as I could.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. But it was slower seller for us. So it was like, I'm going to take this away for a little while, and I'll bring it back at a later date, maybe when more people are more informed about it. And that's ours was on the higher end of ABV too, so it wasn't as approachable as a lot of places. What percentage are you guys at?
7.2. So
7.2,
we're still in that post 60s like super Saison category.
Yeah, and we were the same thing where it was just a hair over like 7%, which made it just slightly less approachable. Where people weren't prepared to maybe drink more than one.
Yeah.
But this is a lovely beer. I mean, just the character you get on classic Saison character. When you get the softness on the palate of that wheat, you can tell that it's there. It's very nice.
Yeah, I'm a yeast forward kind of guy, which is why I like this beer the best. This is still to me my number one beer on the menu. But we had the same issue, or not issue, but concern of you don't see a lot of Saisons on tap. They are traditionally not a good seller because it's an unknown kind of beer style. But that was part of our challenge of going into it, and to this day, like we're in year 4 now, take away the traditional big sellers, 10-pin, Phenos, or House IPA. We have a cider on draft that's really popular. This Ironwood is number 4 or 5.
Yeah,
and that's been consistent year over year. So we've done a good job of tricking people into like drinking this because the joke was like, hey, people in Louisville, they don't know any better. They've never had any of this beer, so we'll just tell them to drink it first. This
is what craft beer is.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was like to what we were talking about earlier. It was a process. Like when I first brewed it. Much like what you're talking about, I brewed that, for me, Fantôme or Saison DuPont, like pepper and almost like bordering on French.
Yeah.
And, we are out in the country here right now. We've spent plenty of time. People would be like, oh, that's different. And I was like, oh, no. So, if you're not from the country, you don't know that.
Yeah.
It's
that's
basically
like, oh, bless your heart.
Good try. Yeah, oh, bless your heart. But so we actually worked with Omega and tweaked our yeast to be more fruit forward. So this is borders on like hef almost, like with that wheat. it's got the banana, like for us, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's got kind of like a fruit cup type of a flavor to it.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a little bit of that, like almost like fruit cup, juicy fruitish.
Yes.
Kind of in the background there.
And for me, like being the curmudgeon-y brewer, like the amount of spice is still at a tolerable level that I can be like, yes, it's just still a Saison.
Yeah.
Like in the back. But yeah, it was definitely something that we realized that to popularize it, you look at like Tank 7, the popularity of that beer is based on the fruit character that's in that.
Yeah.
And they use, like Amarillo and some of those more fruity hops, but
right.
I think their fermentation, their grain bill, all that stuff is pulls in those maybe wheat beer drinkers and people that are into more flavorful beers.
Well, I think because it's such a niche style for a lot of drinkers that off the top of my head, there's only a handful of breweries in this area really even producing Saisons.
Yeah.
You guys, John McGrory up at Green Valley, although I don't think he has one on right now.
Yeah.
But I know that he, when he was at Butcher and Brewer, he always had.
Yeah, Farmer's Daughters.
Always had Saison on, and had made terrific Saisons up there. Jennifer at Bell Tower does terrific Saisons.
Yep.
And that's, there's not a whole lot of other people I can think of that are really interested in doing them.
Oh, yeah.
And actually doing it well. So it's certainly a niche place, and that's, I said, I hope people listening to this come drink this Saison.
Yes.
Adjust your palates, get into something a little outside of your comfort zone, and give it a whirl, because I think you can certainly come to love these beers. So you talked about yeast. I know you said you're using, like you said, 3 different strains on this, and so like a Heffy strain, a true like Belgian Saison strain.
So 2 Belgian strains, and then another strain X, we'll call it.
Strain X. Detail. Secrets are allowed to be secrets here.
It was something that I really put a lot of manipulation into, and I think honestly a great spot to start is Saison Stein from Omega. If you want that varied culture.
Yeah.
And then, like we've talked about too, perfect is such a different definition for anyone.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Because everybody's tastes are subjective, and everybody's got a different palate,
Yeah.
So for sure, yeah, you can't. I guess really, what's perfect to one person as far as beer goes certainly is not going to be the same to everyone.
Yeah.
That definitely holds true. I guess you want to talk about hop sourcing for.
Sure. Yeah. So previously, before 2024, we were 90% Ohio, 10% Michigan, and the reason for that was I had relationships with, especially like Top Hops, is one of the premier growers in the state, and the biggest thing for me was I couldn't find traditional flavor and aroma hops in the state of Ohio. So that Saaz, that Tat, in that wheelhouse.
Right.
And I can find them in Michigan. Yeah. But with Edisham, one of the proprietaries, coming online, I got that floral, I got that spice, I got that character. Yeah. So 10 Pin is entirely Edisham. This year in 2024, we went all the way over to Ohio.
Yeah.
So, and like you were talking about earlier too, we picked the worst possible year to do it. We had late frost, drought, you name it.
Yeah, and that's it's really easy for those products, especially beer brewing products, agricultural products in this state. The weather can just ruin those crops here so easily because there's so many fungal problems and dot and all that kind of stuff that you get it too wet, too dry, and it really just has to be just right to do well year over year. And that's a friend of mine, Ben Stoffenegger, has a little hop farm east of Alliance.
Mahoning Valley,
Mahoning Valley hops, and I bought a bunch of hops for wet hopping beers, in the past from him, and that's just watching his struggles with a lot of the weather and stuff. Growing that, we tried at Maze for a little while to grow both barley and.
Oh no way! I did not know that.
hops. The hop yard never really took off because no one had time to go and maintain it. We got poles up and strung everything, and then it was just like, well, nobody has time to go.
It's super labor
Weed
intensive.
this, spray it, prune things. Like, we just didn't have the time to do it. And then we got the first year that we planted malting barley was the only year that we got a usable crop. The subsequent years, it was too wet, got too much fungus, and just it couldn't be used. So it's kind of one of those things where we might circle back around to trying to do that again in the future, especially with Matt Rustic Brew Farm, take it down there and have it malted.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I know Bill out there has been talking about maybe wanting to put another barley crop in this year, next year maybe, and seeing where it goes.
That was one of the big blessings for us and guiding lights of why we went the direction we did, is being where we are. We have the opportunity. Like you guys, man, you have the perfect situation because you have the land.
Yeah.
And we have the climate and stuff like that to do it.
Right. And that's, I said, if you can get a good year weather-wise where the spring's not too wet, you can certainly pull it off.
Yeah. Excuse me.
So, do you guys have hobbies outside of the brewery now? Because that's kind of the thing is always, we got into this as a hobby and then it kind of took over and now here we are, and it's like you got to kind of find something else to keep your attention that you're not just thinking this is work stuff now. And that's, I know you said you went to culinary school and you worked at Publican for a long time. I very much do a lot of cooking and stuff at home. I've gotten into way heavy pizza making and bread making and stuff now. Fermentation adjacent foods.
Yeah.
You had a dinner, and I think you had to cancel it. And I'm waiting for the invite to come back because I need some patio pizza.
Yes,
Cheers.
for sure. Absolutely. We can totally do that because I love making pizza at home.
I talked to Jake a while back. It didn't happen, but I'd like to eventually do it. Is I want Jake to come in and do some kind of collab day or open on a Sunday. Have Jake bring down some recipes and just do a real limited 3 thing.
We gotta do that roast pork sandwich, man. Yeah. It's delicious.
Broccoli rabe and stuff like
that.
Oh
yeah. Philly roast pork sandwich. Chardonnay provolone, roast pork.
Garrett's not on the internet, so he doesn't see the pictures that I see.
I'm total Cro-Magnon person.
I don't blame you for not being on the internet.
But
he's better for it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Just more feral. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know. I've got 3 kids, so I coach usually one sport a year. So if I'm not here, I also own my day job is I own a consulting company. So between that and sports with kids, and I'm just, I can barely make it out to even visit another brewery. Like Bell Tower, for example. I've been wanting to go since the day they opened. I haven't been up there.
Yeah, it's in the same boat. When you got kids at home, and that's why I think cooking is kind of my other hobby, is because we all got to eat still.
Yep.
So it's that's the thing that I can get away with, where I've got time to cook a meal at home.
Yeah.
But not a whole lot more time outside of that with a couple of kids and everything else.
Garrett does jiu-jitsu in the morning.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. I do a little bit. Just for, like you're saying, that personal mental space. But it's the same thing with, as all of us. I got 2 kids that we're just coming off a wrestling season, which is the most immersive sport I've ever been involved with.
It's intense.
Holy shit.
That's an intense one to be involved in. And that's, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, you already know. And that's, for a while after I got out of the Army, I was doing jiu-jitsu, because I lived, 2 blocks from East Coast martial arts over in Canton. So it's 3-4 days a week I was going over and rolling just because I was I need something to do. And that's it. I did that until the injuries started piling up and showing up to the fire department with black eyes and torqued shoulders and elbows and stuff wasn't working out super hot. So
Katie would.
I forgot you were in Alliance.
Yeah, I was a fireman on Alliance for a decade there. Left the lieutenant 2017 to just brew beer full time. Did you guys have any other careers in mind outside? I said I know you have a day job still. Any other career that you had considered
Yeah, it was all culinary, and I actually went to. I got an associate's degree in fire science technology. I did. So I eyed it up at the time that I got it. It was either going to be wildland or wildfire, stuff, which the quality of life was not for anyone.
No.
And then Chicago at the time was on a hiring freeze, so it was not a thing. It was
and that's depending. It's tough to get into because when I first got out of the military, I worked at a hospital for a year after I got out, and I was living in Florida at the time, and I worked at a hospital on the University of Florida campus, and then I was trying to get on the Gainesville Fire Department, the Alachua County Fire Department, everything else, and I remember I tested for Gainesville, and there was 500 people that showed up on test day to take, start with the written test. So we all did the written test, and then all the people that didn't pass that went away. Yep. And then it was now they had, this subset, there was maybe 100 people left after that. They were all right, now we're going to do a video personality test. Where it was sit in front of a video camera, they play you scenarios on a TV of different emergency scenarios and record how you're reacting to the scenario, what you're telling the people there and everything else. And then after that, it was all right, we'll send you something in the mail, if you're moving on to the next thing, which the next thing was the candidate physical agility test. Yeah. And so, a couple of weeks later, I get a letter in the mail, hey, you passed that part, come do the candidate physical agility test. So I go and do that, and then I waited, it was another, month, and then I got a piece of paper in the mail. All right, you're one of, 10 candidates coming to interview with the battalion chiefs. And so it's go sit down with all the battalion chiefs at this giant long table, and they're all asking questions, throwing it at you. And so it was me and 10 other candidates went and did that, and then I heard nothing. Yeah. And a month goes by and I hadn't heard anything. I was all right, I'm going to call down to the city and see if they know when we're supposed to hear anything. And so I called down there well, there was only one position open and you didn't get it, so I was shit.
Just long silence on the phone.
So then it just became a thing my dad up here was hey, local department's hiring, you should just come up and test for them. Yeah. And so I came back up home, took the test, was the number one hire on the department that year, and then worked there for a decade.
I think people who haven't gone through those type of selection processes don't fully get how, you're right, those lags between.
Yeah, and that was my first time doing it there, and I had no idea how long that process is.
Gosh, dang.
And it's, especially for bigger city departments, it takes a while. Yeah. Because like I said, you have hundreds and hundreds of people that show up to those tests, and they got to whittle all that down and find their best candidates. Yeah. So this is probably last thing we're going to talk about here is same thing I posited to John last week. Lemmy from Motorhead famously was asked what they brought to heavy music, and what he responded with was nothing. We brought nothing to heavy music. What we'd done was taken away. We took away the pretentious musicianship, the outlandish outfits, and what we brought was real and true. So what do you think you brought to craft brewing or hope to bring to craft brewing?
I think, much to Lemmy's point, for us it's devolution or de-evolution, however you want to say that. It's going back to foundational styles and going back to foundational ingredient sourcing. Yeah. For me, we talked at OCBA a couple years ago, and the biggest thing for me was if you're a brewer and you've never been in a hop yard or a barley field, what are you doing?
Right. You know? You need to kind of understand how those things are grown and have relationships with the people that are doing it.
100%. That's a big driver for me a lot of times too. Is I don't care what anyone says. I think farming is the hardest job there is. It never sleeps.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the toughest jobs in America, and you have so much burden on your shoulders, not just from being successful and providing for yourself, but feeding the people of the country that you live in.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, it's that motivation point. What I really hope our beers always carry is that they think it's good because we're taking something they worked really hard on and, like Adam was saying, under manipulating it, just trying to showcase the field character they worked really hard on.
Bit of terroir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Like in hops, undeniably true.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you guys so much for doing the podcast. Thank you for having me out here. The beer's obviously delicious. Thank you for sharing your story, your philosophies on what you're doing out here.
Thanks for having us, man.
I know that we have some arm wrestling to get to.
We do.
I'm ready to bring it.
I got to stretch it out.
So go straight. Stretch your hammies. Whatever you got to do to get prepared. And while you get going, cheers, guys. Thanks so much for doing this.
Cheers.
Yeah,
love
absolutely.
you, man. Thanks for stopping
guys.
out.
Thank you. See you guys all. Here in a couple of weeks.